So after the first 11 games of the NBA season, the Golden State Warriors looked like they were on the path of making a true playoff run and making some really big playoff noise after they inevitably missed the playoffs last season and the entirety of it. Over the first 11 games, the Golden State Warriors were 9-2, and a lot of things were working really well for this Golden State Warriors team. With all their size issues that they have, they were one of the best rebounding teams in the league and still are one of the best rebounding teams in the league. They got major contributions from guys like Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green defensively, which made this team one of the best defensive teams in the league. And with having Steph Curry being the greatest shooter of all time, you also had guys like Buddy Hield, who was on a phenomenal hot streak to start the season. But now, over the past 8 games, the Golden State Warriors are 2-6, and they sit at 7th in the Western Conference with a record of 12-8. And I think we're starting to see how some of the teams who have kind of gotten off to a hot start are kind of starting to slow down and cool off a little bit to where you can find their real ranking amongst these really good teams in the NBA. If we take a look at how the Milwaukee Bucks started, where they started 1-6, and now they're sitting comfortably in the Eastern Conference, and they've won maybe 6 out of their last 7 games. If we look at the Golden State Warriors and how hot they started, they're starting to trickle down towards the bottom of the Western Conference. The Los Angeles Lakers, who started out 3-0, beating 3 really good teams with the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Phoenix Suns, and the Sacramento Kings, they're starting to fall into those play-in conversations. The Dallas Mavericks, who started their season looking pretty average, have won a lot of their recent games, and now they're the 3rd seed in the Western Conference. So this is the part of the season where the bad teams who've been playing good to start out are starting to trickle down a little bit. The Detroit Pistons, who started out the season at 500, which is way better than what they did last season, they're starting to lose a couple of games now, and they're starting to kind of slim their way out of the Eastern Conference standings. So this is always an important part of the season because we always see every single year that maybe the first 20 games, a lot of bad teams are playing really competitively. I mean, I know there are teams like the Brooklyn Nets who are playing way better than what their roster shows or what their collection of players shows. So after that first 20-game stretch, we're starting to see these guys start to lose 5 straight, or we start to see guys lose 10 straight because we're starting to get a real feel of what the NBA is going to shape into be. So even though the Golden State Warriors had this great run to start off the season, there have been some holes in this team that I think weren't being addressed enough when they were having this hot streak. And obviously, when we look at Steph Curry, I think one of the things that was really, really helping out the Golden State Warriors was, one, they were getting that second option of scoring in Buddy Hield that really helped the Golden State Warriors because that was their biggest concern coming into the season. There has been a multitude of mock trades coming out over the past offseason and maybe even started the NBA season that the Golden State Warriors needed for a second option. There was heavily rumored options for them to go get guys like Lauri Markkanen or Brandon Ingram or Zach LaVine to really come in and take on that load as a secondary option to Steph Curry because we know he cannot carry this offensive load as at his age anymore. So now that the Golden State Warriors are starting to fall in the standings just a little bit, I kind of want to talk about what they have done wrong and how they can improve and potentially still make that playoff noise that we all thought they could within the first 15 games of the season. And before I start this video, I don't want to come in here saying that I thought the Golden State Warriors were a championship contending team. I still didn't think that was the ceiling for them, but I definitely thought that there could have been some type of playoff noise they could have made. They could have made a first round very interesting. They could have maybe even gotten to the second round. But them sitting at a top 3 seed in the Western Conference, I definitely did not think that was sustainable, especially in a conference like this where it is the most competitive we have seen in maybe the past 10 years. And for starters, I think Steph Curry has still been really good this season. He's averaging about 22 points per game, 6 rebounds and 7 assists. But once again, I still don't think this is the Steph Curry where he can provide the level of offense every single night for this team to be a comfortable playoff team in the West. I think we do see moments where Steph just can't be on the floor as much as he used to. We definitely see moments where Steph is kind of not generating the easy offense that he once did. Now, there are still the moments where Steph's gravity alone is going to create easy shots for guys like Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, Jonathan Kuminga, Buddy Hield, Moses Moody, or others. The fact that DeAnthony Melton is going to be out for the season, which was a very key pickup for them in the offseason. The fact that Buddy Hield has come down to life, I think that is something that is very important as well. And the fact that they just haven't gotten the production that they would have wanted from their young players this season that they kind of guarded with their lives over the offseason. And I think that's something that has been the problem over the Golden State Warriors run post-dynasty. There have been so many potential opportunities where the Golden State Warriors could have traded these young pieces while their trade assets or while their trade value was really high. And I think we're starting to see teams do that a lot more now. They're starting to hold on to this young talent, maybe this young talent that they just like the idea of more than the actual player. If these rumors about Lauri Markkanen being traded to Golden State and Golden State not wanting to pull the trigger because they didn't want to give up Jonathan Kuminga or Brandon Podziemski up for Lauri Markkanen, I just think that you're wasting the back end years of Steph Curry's career, because this Golden State Warriors team still can make the playoffs. They can still be a play-in team and get in as a 7th or 8th seed. But when you have a player who creates an easy offense as Steph Curry, who's going to be doing that for the next 2 to 3 seasons before he retires, you have to maximize that window as much as you possibly can. Draymond Green is still one of the 10 best defenders in the NBA. You have to maximize that window as much as you possibly can. And while I sit here and say that you have to maximize that window, they have brought in a key amount of depth. They have brought in a majority of very high-level starters or very high-level role players on this team to where you can have an injury to a starter and you can bring somebody else in and they could be productive for this team. But once again, I think the biggest thing the Golden State Warriors were missing was that second option, and they just have not gotten that yet. But to start out the season, it looked like they had it in Buddy Hield. In the first, I would say, 8 games of Buddy Hield's season for the Golden State Warriors, he was averaging about 21 points per game, 51% from the field, 51% from 3, and 86% from the free throw line. He was shooting about 51% from 3 on 9 3-point attempts per game. So even through all of those games, Buddy Hield only started 1 game throughout that entire stretch. So I think we really got to see a glimpse of how dangerous this Golden State Warriors team could be if they have another 20-point per game scorer. But even around all the Buddy Hield talk and how good he was playing, there was still some disbelief that he could sustain this throughout an 82-game season. Because now, over the last 7 games, Buddy Hield has been giving you 11 points per game on 39, 38, 85 shooting splits. And we kind of see this a lot. We kind of see it oftenly where Buddy Hield is having all the tools to be a 16 to 19 point per game type of player. And you would think that the Golden State Warriors was the perfect opportunity for him to showcase that, because this is a team that is heavily implemented on shooters and guys who space the floor around Steph Curry to make it not only impossible to guard him, but to have to play in rotation with all these high level 3-point shooters that the Golden State Warriors have. And I just don't think Buddy Hield has been really sustaining that level of value that he was providing throughout the first 10 games. And right now, the Golden State Warriors are on a 5-game losing streak, and all 5 of these games were in the clutch. If we look at their clutch stats, they're 29th in offensive rating and 24th in defensive rating. If we take a look at their last 5 game stats, they're 22nd in 3-point percentage, but 4th in 3-point attempts. So they're still getting these shots up, they're just not falling. If we look at the past 5 games, they're 20th in defensive rating and 25th in offensive rating. And I think a lot of that has to come with the fact that Steph Curry is the only guy who can give you 20 points per game on this team consistently. Like, we come into a game expecting Steph Curry to have 20 to 25 points a night because of the level of player that Steph Curry has been and that he still is. But when we have to ask somebody like Jonathan Kuminga or Andrew Wiggins or Buddy Hield to be a 19 to 21 point per game type of guy next to Steph to make his job a little bit easier, that's where we stumble. And if we just take a look at some of the young players that they heavily guarded over the offseason, they haven't really been proving much at all. Jonathan Kuminga and Brandon Podziemski have not been good for this team to start out. Jonathan Kuminga is giving you about 14 points per game on 43, 29, 61 splits. He's not efficient and he's not impacting the floor when he's on. Same with AirPods. He's giving you about 8 points per game on 38, 21, 74 splits. He has not been the greatest for the Warriors at all either. So once again, we got a glimpse of how good this team could really be if they had that second option next to Steph Curry. I still think this team could really be a dangerous playoff team if they were to have even a Zach LaVine or a Brandon Ingram next to Steph Curry that can give you a decent 22, 23 points per game night in and night out. Because if you were to look at a Zach LaVine type of player, yes, the defense can be struggling a little bit at times, but you still have a solid defender in Steph Curry or in Andrew Wiggins. You still have a solid defender or a top 10 defender in the league in Draymond Green. Gary Payton II is still a solid on-ball defender. So if you bring in a guy who can play so heavily off ball and is such a sniper from the long distance and is so athletic and can run the transition perfectly, that's almost a match made in heaven. Lauri Markkanen was almost a match made in heaven. Steph Curry makes offense so easy for guys like Zach LaVine and Lauri Markkanen, where it's a matchup made in heaven, and this offense could be really dynamic with one of these guys next to Steph. But what really pushes me away from that is they have not been able to move Jonathan Kuminga, and they have not been able to move AirPods, and now their trade value is probably the lowest it's ever been. Even if we look at Jonathan Kuminga, he was not getting the minutes or the play time necessary to be like, oh, we have a final verdict on him. And then he comes in last season and he plays really well. So now his trade value is at an all-time high. The Warriors still don't move him. And now he comes in and he struggles. You're probably not going to get nearly as much for Jonathan Kuminga now as you would have last trade deadline. So is this a world where we run into the play-in opportunity again, and it's a one-game sample size or a one-game scenario where they could end up losing to the Lakers? They can end up losing to the Clippers. They can end up losing to the Spurs. And I still believe that is something that's hard to bet on. It's really hard to bet against Golden State with Draymond Green and Steph Curry and their just willingness to win and their experience they have around just winning basketball games. It's still something that's very hard to do. But when I look at this Golden State Warriors team and how inefficient they've been and how inconsistent they've been over the past few games, it's really hard to believe that they can make some noise in the playoffs either. So if you guys like this type of content, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. I am currently out of town when this video comes out, so I am posting a few videos and recording a few videos ahead of time. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think about the Golden State Warriors and how they are going to improve. And with that being said, I'm out. Peace.